Yeah, so welcome to the Black Seats. I'm Suge. I have Mike here with me. We were in the middle of recording our episode of the regular podcast, but we woke up today to some very sad news. Baseball has lost its home run king up until 2007. Henry Aaron, Hammerin Hank played for the Milwaukee and the Atlanta Braves and the Milwaukee Brewers. When I woke up, I opened Twitter and I just because I usually get like these notifications from ESPN or Bleacher Report, that this person died. But I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw like everybody was talking about Hank Aaron, and at the end of I just thought people were just talking about Hank Aaron about how like great he is, but you got to the end and it was like rest in peace, stuff like that. So Mike, how did you find out the news?
Ironically, my sleep's been off. If you guys follow the show, so last night, I guess it was last night. I was like going through. I follow like baseball archives. I just follow like a bunch of historical Instagrams, and someone just sent me a thing about Hank Aaron like yesterday, and it was just like facts and stuff. So it was like, all right, like great, interesting stuff. And then this morning, and then I saw it said, R.I.P. Kind of the same person sent me another one because there's someone who sends me a lot of like historical facts, like sports stuff, and I was like, oh shit, that's weird. It always happens though. Like if I'm looking up someone, it's like out of nowhere, like they're gone. Like even like I like TV and stuff, like sitcom stars and stuff. I'll be looking up all their stuff and their facts and stuff, and then oh wow, the next day I'm like, But we talked a lot about Hank Aaron recently on one of our episodes in the archives. There's one of the famous shots I remember of him. Obviously, is when he he broke Babe Ruth's record, and that was later in his career, obviously, and like the whole trotting around, like those. Like he was respected, but he also dealt with a lot of stuff too, But yeah, so I'm just reading up on a lot of his other past stuff too, and so sure, tell me more about everything else about Hammer and Hank.
So this is along with a long line of Hall of Famers, baseball Hall of Famers who have passed in the last 365 plus days, because you gotta, like, with this pandemic, you gotta group 2020 and 2021 into one big thing, because the last year was kind of like a wash. But so far we've got Hank Aaron, Tom Lasorda, Don
Right.
Sutton, who like passed like only a couple days ago, Lou Brock, Whitey Ford, who we talked about on the show, Bob
Whitey
Gibson,
Ford, yeah, for real.
Al Kaline, Joe Morgan, Phil Necro, Tom Seaver, and then a person who wasn't a Hall of Famer, but he was trending towards, getting enshrined, Dick Allen of the Philadelphia Phillies and the um Chicago White Sox, amongst other teams. He looked like he was on the way there, but unfortunately he passed away before he could be enshrined in the Hall of Fame. And when I saw that Hank Aaron had passed away, my first initial thought was one of the more astonishing facts about baseball. And it's always a contentious thing, the Hall of Fame voting and stuff like that, because right now it's kind of contentious in light of the events at the US Capitol 2 weeks ago. You had a person, Kurt Schilling, who is already, notorious and kind of has a bad light on him due to his political beliefs. And I think it came out like yesterday that some Hall of Fame voters were trying to get their ballot that they already put out, that they might have voted for Kurt Schilling, and they wanted to take their vote away from him, because obviously we talked about it on the show.
Very vocal.
Yeah, how crazy it was, his support of like extreme right wing stuff, on top of like transphobic stuff, homophobic stuff, Islamophobic stuff, racist stuff. and it comes into where you got to question somebody's character. But the interesting thing I said about Hank Aaron was, we talking about Mariano Rivera on this show too, where
Mhm.
he's the first unanimous Hall of Famer. He was the first person to be 100%. Everybody voted for him. Blah 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 blah. But Hank Aaron, now at the time of his retirement, he was the all-time leader in RBIs, all-time leader in home runs. Of course, we know that until Barry Bonds broke
Mhm.
that record, and then he was like third or fourth all-time in hits. And he also had a 305 career batting average. He won a couple Gold Gloves, and he was like like the record holder for most like all-star appearances. He had 21 all-star
21.
appearances,
Okay.
and
18 in a row.
he had 18 in a
Right.
row. It was just astonishing that somebody could look at like that resume and just say like, "Oh, that's not a Hall of Famer." Like even if it's a handful of
Yeah.
people, and we've talked about that before, like people with the Hall of Fame. So that's the one thing I remember about Hank Aaron. Then the other thing is, like I see a lot of people, they kept on talking about his, the things he had to put up with en route to becoming the home run king. Like his life was threatened. His family's lives were threatened. He actually is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the person who in the history of like the world, I guess, got the most hate mail. Like people were really not trying to see him become the home run king, and it's just astonishing to me because becoming a home run king, like he had to work just as hard as Babe Ruth did, if not even harder, because he played again. We talked about the Negro League thing. Like Hank Aaron had to play against the best white pitchers, the best black pitchers, the best Latino pitchers. So whereas Babe Ruth, like, you just had to be like one of the best like white men to play the game, but you probably weren't as good as like the best black men. So, Babe Ruth never had to try to hit a home run off of like Satchel Paige. But Hank Aaron, he had to try to hit home runs off of like Don Drysdale and Sandy Koufax, like regardless. So it ain't like this is a black man and he just got into the major leagues and he hit 755 home runs, and 400 of those home runs were like spotted to him just because he was black. But people didn't want to accept that he was gonna earn the right to be the all-time home run leader. He played for 20 some odd years and he was just consistent.
Right. And they went from Milwaukee down, then Atlanta, and then he did it in Atlanta. Then from there, he stayed in that area until now. He actually grew. We talked about this in our discussion about in the previous Negro League thing, where he had a relationship with like Ted Turner, CNN. He got really involved with the local area down there. And me, I always talk about wrestling too, but he got really involved with like yeah, Ted Turner, and Ted Turner owned WCW, and Ted Turner he was like really supportive of having like the first like official black NWA champion, like an official one, and it was Ron Simmons. And Hank Aaron was like really like vocal about supportive of that, and maybe that's like a kind of a echoes what he felt during the whole home run chase. Because we actually, you also know about just Babe Ruth in general. People were just very like very protective of that 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 record. So anyone who came close to that kind of like had to deal with people just being like, very very negative towards it because it was like very very like a coveted and like holy thing. But yeah, so Ron Simmons got a lot of hate mail when he was given the NWA title. So Hank Aaron talked to him and he was just like, I've been there, man. I've been there. He just was kind of like supportive of him in that way. That was 92, 91, which is crazy. And he broke the record in what, 74,
Yeah,
73? Do you know? Yeah.
74.
Think about that. Yeah. So he always seemed kind of like that, where he was like, relatable with all the people that dealt with just that environment, and especially being that in the South too. It's just ironic that this came up now when we were just talking about him. That seems to be like kind of the theme lately. Talk about someone and then something like this happens. 86 years old. He was actually the oldest, second oldest player in his final year. And the person that was oldest was just like he came in for a couple of games, and it just shows like how kind of the whole the whole like Iron Horse thing with like Lou Gehrig, like Iron Horse. He played for how many years? Like decades and decades. He was always a prominent voice and presence in baseball.
Yeah, and a lot of people they kept on talking about like the racism he endured. He grew up. He was born in Mobile, Alabama. Grew up in Mobile, Alabama. When he came up, first minor leagues teams that he played in, it was in Jackson, Mississippi. So he had to deal with the racism there. So to come 20 years removed from that, and then you're approaching Beirut, something you've worked your whole life towards, just being a good baseball player and all that stuff. And I'm going back to like the Hall of Fame thing. Like,
Mm.
by the end of his career, like when everything was wrapped up, he had 755 home runs, all time leader in RBIs, all time leader in total bases, third or fourth in hits. It was an interesting fact that even if like you took away all 755 of his home runs, he would still have 3,000 hits.
Mm.
So it's
Mhm.
it's crazy how talented he was.
And like he never went over 50 home runs in 1 year. That shows you like how many years he did it for. It wasn't just like he had a couple, he had like a 10 years of like 50 to 60. It was a steady, his whole career was like 30 to 50 was like the range. It was always steady, you know,
Yeah, he was
which
consistent.
is
Like
also
he
interesting.
won, he won the 1957 World Series with the Milwaukee Braves.
Right.
Played in
That's the Yankees.
1958 World Series, lost against the Yankees, but he was a world champion. He played in All Star games. He won MVPs, won Gold Gloves, and was times where like I don't even think they had Gold Gloves when he started, but they had Gold Gloves at the midway point of his career, and he still collected them.
Mm.
And for somebody to be like, it's just astonishing all the boxes he checked, and these people. It just shows you like the nonsense with the Hall of Fame voting and how it was back then, and it's still kind of not really corrected now. He eventually became a Hall of Famer, and he died a Hall of Famer, as well he should be. But one of the things like that bothered me about today, like, there's a couple different things. People kept on pointing to the fact that he was like very like reserved. He was very like humble. He accomplished all these things, but he never talked, and it was just like weird for me as a black person to hear that coming from like white people that enjoy baseball, because I'm like, all right, like, oh, you was glad because he wasn't like a uppity Negro. So that was one of the things that like bothered me, and then people also saying like, the racism like he endured. Like I said, this is a man that grew up in Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, played, for 10 or so years, because I think the Braves moved to Atlanta in 1976, and he played with the Braves. I mean, 1966, and then played with the Braves from 1966 to 1974, 74,
76. Yeah.
75, or 76.
76 is
And
the last year.
yeah,
It
so
wasn't the
he
full
he
year though, I don't think.
he played a good amount of his career in Atlanta, and then he also played in Milwaukee, which, as we've seen, isn't like the most like
Mm.
racially diverse or like accepting place we've seen in recent years. We've heard stories like that.
No,
Uh,
I heard that too. Let me ask you a question, Shug. You heard people saying that it was in a good way that he was humble and he didn't speak. He wasn't outspoken. Like people were saying that in like a
yeah,
positive way.
like they were
Or
saying,
what?
like
Like,
he wasn't well, one of the things I heard, and it kind of pissed me off, and
really?
I think it was like because I had my TV on MLB Network the whole day, and it was like Mad Dog. He was like, yeah, like he dealt with the racism, but he never became militant. I was like, I was like, what the fuck does that mean?
All right, I was gonna bring this up. Yeah. So like a lot of things I always heard like yeah, over the years is that like they would always like label him like the same thing, and they would say like derogatory in a derogatory way. You don't walk in someone's shoes or cleats and everything.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is
You
a
know,
person he dealt with racism his whole life. Like like I was the clips that they actually showed of like Hank Aaron talking. He's talking about like I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. Like the Ku Klux Klan used to march up and down the street like for no reason at all, just to show us that they were there. And
of
his
course.
mother
Yeah.
used to make him like hide under the bed. And he tell his father like he was born in 1934, so he's like a little kid in like the 40s. So he's like, I want to be a pilot, and his dad's like, well, ain't no black man a pilot. Get that out of your mind.
Mhm.
I want to be a baseball player. Ain't no black baseball players. Get that out of your mind. And guess what? Ends up breaking Babe Ruth's record.
Mhm.
And the other thing, and I just think like for like white people, like black people enduring racism should not be a admirable thing. Like it's the black people that fight against racism and say that enough is enough. Like those are the black people that you should be celebrating. So like when I hear that stuff, like like Hank Aaron, he endured so much racism, and it's so admirable. It's like you should be more disgusted at the fact that this is the environment that he had to deal with. The admirable thing about Hank Aaron was when he got to 713 or 714. Well, 713 because Babe Ruth had 714.
One season.
When he got to 713 and he was getting all this hate mail and all these threats against his mom, threats against his wife, threats against his kids, all of that nonsense. Like the fact that he didn't say like, you know what, this is too much. Like, let me just retire with 713 home runs. Let Babe Ruth have that record. Blah 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 blah. But he said, nah. Like, as a black person, like I find inspiring, and the part that I think everyone, no matter what race you are, black, white, Hispanic, young, old, whatever, whatever, if you look at the life of this man, the fact that he went on, he said, nah, like I earned this. Like nobody gave me 700 home runs. Like when I was in the minor leagues and I couldn't sleep in the same hotel as my teammates, when I came up in Milwaukee and people were calling me lazy because I walk slow to the batter's box, stuff like that. Like I worked hard to get where I'm at. And I'm not letting anyone take that away from me. And he did that. And I think the resonating thing with that is the fact that he hit 715, and guess what? The rest of his career, he hit 40 more home runs on top of that. He made sure there was like
Mhm.
a distance between him and Babe Ruth, and that's the part I find inspiring. I always say, like, the sad thing about that movie 42, while it's a great movie, I think Chadwick Boseman did a great job, and I think it's sad that he's not here with us anymore. Is I feel like the fact that our movie only covered the first season and it just showed, oh, like, all right, Jackie Robinson, you're gonna be the first black major leaguer, but you gotta people are gonna say racist shit to you, do racist shit to you, and you just gotta take it on the chin. And then you come to find out, like, that was only in place. That was an agreement between him and Branch Rickey for the first 3 years of his career. There's so much different articles of or different like anecdotes of Jackie Robinson arguing with umpires, arguing with the opposing manager, talking shit to the other dugout, stuff like that that wasn't included in our movie. Like it's just funny to me that like everybody, and I think it's like a issue with race, like especially when we talked about like the 1776 commission. Like, why
We just
can't you
talk about it. Yeah.
why won't you show black people being standing up for themselves? Like black people standing up for themselves is not taking shit and not is not receiving racism and just like not responding to it and having the strength not to respond to it. That's not encouraging for black people. Like the encouragement for black people is like the yo, like, oh, you want to call me this and you want to call me that. All right, I'm gonna tell you this and I'm gonna call you that. Not only that, I'm gonna win MVP. I'm gonna break all your records, all of that stuff. Like that's the encouraging thing. So that's the thing, like I got from today, and it really like upset me how much like people talk, and I think it's unwittingly, but it's how um society and like pop culture has you bred. It's just like, oh, like, yeah, like, because the other part about that too, Mike, is like it also gives like all of these white supremacists, like all these people that's coming on TV when they take exception to things, Joe Biden calling out white supremacy, and I'm saying like I feel like he called us out. I feel like he that was offensive, blah 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 blah. Because it gives these people when they talk about like Colin Kaepernick,
Yeah.
oh, like, well, Colin Kaepernick, like he's kneeling, like, well, Hank Aaron, he was, he got death threats, so they kind of like play it up like Hank Aaron had to deal with this, Colin Kaepernick had to deal with this, like Colin Kaepernick is
Mm.
weak, Hank Aaron just ignoring the racism. He's strong, and they kind of play the two against each other. Like that's what I feel.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting dynamic that no one really talks about. I totally I get what you're saying. I get it. It's kind of like using like, oh yeah, well this happened, so let's forget everything else. Like, oh no, 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 that kind of type of thing. Like using one example and then totally ignoring everything else, and then you use that as like a. It's very it's complex, but I'm just trying to say like as society we have like we use like, you were saying basically being proactive and like vocal and stuff, and you were saying that Hank Aaron was kind of being used as like, oh, he shouldered the burden for everyone, so let's use him, and then you ignore everything else. Kind of like that's what I always think. We're like we use this as like a thing where you see in highlight reels and stuff, and like the thing keeps moving on. Like there's always more things to be done, but you use something as an example just so you pacify a movement or you pacify like a thing that needs to be done, and then people just kind of like accept it, and then it takes a while for another thing to happen. Then eventually down the line, it happens again. So it's it's complicated, of course, but I was more interested in hearing what you had to say about it, Shug.
Barry Bonds, who passed him, who's now the all-time home run leader in baseball, and still trying to get into the Hall of Fame. But obviously, people associate him with PEDs and think that he cheated his way. So he left this comment: "I want to send my heartfelt and warmest condolences to the Aaron family on their loss today. I was lucky enough to spend time with Hank on several occasions during my career, and I've always had the deepest respect and admiration for all that he did, both on and off the field. He's an icon, a legend, and a true hero to so many who will forever be missed. Hank Aaron, thank you for everything you ever taught us, for being a trailblazer through adversity and setting an example for all of us African American ball players who came after you. Being able to grow up and have the idols and role models I did help shape me for a future I could have never dreamed of. Hank's passing will forever be felt by all of us who loved the game, and his impact will forever be cemented in my heart. So a lot of people they tried to play the two of them against each other, and
Yeah.
I heard like Matt Vasgersian today. He was like, well, Hank Aaron, it was part of the whole like being humble and being soft spoken type of thing. He was like, yeah, well, you knew in like Hank Aaron's heart that like they accomplished what he accomplished in 20 years, they accomplished in 10 years. And I assume that was like a shot at like the steroid guys and the guys with the PED rumors associated with them. The thing about it is like Barry Bonds played from 1986 to 2007, so he played 22 major league seasons, and he only had one more 50 home run season than Hank Aaron had, and that was his 73 home run season. But Barry Bonds, for all his career, you could look up his stats. Like he never hit 50 home runs in a season other than that year. Like whereas like your Mark McGuire's, your Sammy Sosa's, like they got those absurd numbers over several different years. Barry Bonds also like a great hitter. He
Yeah.
was almost at 3,000 hits. He had all these Gold Gloves when he was still able in left field. So to me Barry Bonds is the greatest player in the history of the game. Um, or in the conversation, Babe Ruth, all of them.
Well, I want to go back to what you said, which is very interesting in my mind with creative wise with 42 the movie, how you could make a whole like half movie based on Hank Aaron like leading because like he broke the record like in the beginning of a season and it's like so dramatic when you read about it. They might have talked about it in Ken Burns' thing, but when I read about it a while ago, the history of like the chase, um, like he was just like, oh, I'm done with it. Like basically, it was like a burden on him, and he was like, I'm done with it. Like I'm glad it's over and everything. And it was like beginning of the season, so you had the whole like off season and everything to deal with it, and that is like the tension with that is just as someone who would like in a creative space would just think about that, like the tension with that, and it was like at the tail end of his career, it was like 2 years before he retired and stuff, and it's just thinking about that, that's very it's that's interesting to me too. Just as like a not even like a sports fan, just as a fan of history and everything.
From the Suge Me the Mooney family and the Black Seats, RIP, Hank Aaron. You fondly remembered here. We're all like baseball fans on this show, so it definitely like hit me hard. But 86 years old, like you live like an awesome life. You live 56 more years than I have yet to see. So, and obviously like the amount of like love and outpouring towards you, and this whole list of like Hall of Famers that passed on between 2020 and 2021. Hank Aaron, Tommy Lasorda, Don Sutton, Lou Brock, Whitey Ford, Bob Gibson, Al Kaline, Joe Morgan, Phil Necro, Tom Seaver, Dick Allen. It's crazy because that's like a lot of videos I've seen. It was like I seen Tom Seaver talking about Hank Aaron, the videos I've seen, and the fact that he's not this whole list of like these greats are not here with us is really really sad. Hopefully, Lord willing, there's no more Hall of Famers that leave us. In a couple days, we're gonna learn the new Hall of Famers. Hopefully, they don't include Kurt Schilling. But this has been the Block Seats. I'm Shug. This is my boy Mike. Till next time,
Thank you for having me.
Shug me the Mooney.